I used to go fishing alone a lot when I was younger. There was a pond about 20 minutes from my house that most people didn't really know about. It wasn't marked on any big maps, and there were no proper signs leading to it. You had to drive down a narrow gravel road, and then walk a short dirt path through some trees before you saw the water. I was around 22 when this happened. It was late afternoon when I got there. The sky was clear, and there was just enough light left to fish for a couple of hours before heading home. I carried my small aluminum boat down to the water, pushed it in, and paddled out to a spot I liked near the center. About 10 minutes after casting my line, I noticed movement near the opposite side of the pond. A small rowboat was drifting out from behind a cluster of trees. There were 2 men in it. They looked middle-aged, maybe late 40 or early 50. Both wore dark jackets, despite the weather not being that cold. What caught my attention right away was that they didn't have any fishing gear. They just sat there as the boat slowly moved closer. I gave a small wave out of habit, but they didn't react at all. They kept coming closer to my boat until they were maybe 20 feet from me, then stopped paddling and let their boat drift. I tried to focus back on my line, but I could feel them looking at me. They leaned toward each other and started whispering. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see their mouths moving. Every few seconds, one of them would glance back at me while the other continued talking. It made my chest feel tight. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just weird. Still, I turned slightly in my seat, so my back was half toward them and pretended to adjust my line. I didn't want to make it obvious that they were making me uncomfortable. A few minutes passed like that. The pond was quiet, except for the occasional small ripple in the water. I turned my head slightly. Their boat was still there, but only one man was sitting in it. The other one was gone. I blinked, thinking maybe he had crouched down or shifted to the other side where I couldn't see him. But from my angle, I should have seen at least part of him. There was nothing. Just the one man, sitting still, staring directly at me now. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. I looked around the water, scanning the surface. That's when I felt it. A soft bump beneath my boat. It wasn't strong enough to rock it hard, just enough to let me know something had touched it. I froze. Another bump, closer to my feet this time. The man in the other boat still continued staring at me. Then, I saw it. On the right side of my boat, just inches from where I was sitting, a hand slowly rose from the water and gripped the edge. For a second, I was creeped out. My heart was racing. I didn't need to see the face to know who it was. It had to be the second man. He had gone into the water and swum under to my boat without making a sound. The hand tightened on the edge like he was about to pull himself up. I reacted without thinking. I grabbed my paddle and slammed it down toward the hand. I don't know if I hit him or not, but the hand slipped back into the water instantly. I didn't wait to see anything else. I started paddling towards shore as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard my name, one of them shouting. I have no idea how they knew my name, but they were yelling it, over and over. I risked a quick look over my shoulder. Their boat was empty now. Both of them were in the water, swimming towards me. Their heads bobbed above the surface as they moved toward me. I paddled harder than I ever had in my life. My arms burned, and the boat wobbled with every stroke. One of them yelled, "Stop! We'll kill you!" There was no mistaking that part. The threat echoed across the pond. I didn't look back again. Finally, the bottom of the boat scraped against mud. I jumped out before it was fully grounded and ran. As I reached the clearing, I heard splashing behind me. I got in the car, locked the doors immediately, and started the engine with shaking hands. When I got home, I locked every door and window. I pulled the blinds shut and kept the lights on for most of the night. My heart didn't calm down for hours, and I am definitely never, ever going back to that pond again. This happened when I was 20 years old. At the time, I used to spend a lot of weekends with my uncle. He had this one fishing spot he would go to regularly, about a 30-minute drive from town. It wasn't a public lake, at least not officially. Most people didn't know about it. There were no signs, no docks around it. Just a long dirt road that led to a clearing, and then water. He would go during the day to set up large fishing nets across certain parts of the lake, then return in the evening to collect whatever had been caught. Sometimes he'd let me come along to help. That night, the sky was clear and bright. It was a full moon, the kind where you don't even need a flashlight because everything is lit in a pale blue glow. We still brought lights, but honestly, the moon did most of the work. When we arrived, the lake looked calm, just still water reflecting the moonlight. We pushed the small motorboat into the water and climbed in. The engine made a low hum as we moved toward the first net. When my uncle started pulling it up, we both froze for a second. The net was packed. Fish were tangled everywhere, thrashing and slapping against each other. Big ones, too. I'd never seen that many caught at once. We both started laughing in disbelief. "This is crazy," I said. "Did you put extra bait or something?" He shook his head, only said, "I've never seen it like this." We started hauling them into the boat. The bottom of the boat quickly became covered in fish. Within minutes, the boat looked almost full. But the net wasn't empty. No matter how many fish we pulled out, there were still more. It didn't make sense. The net should have been lighter by then, but it still felt heavy in my uncle's hands. And he just kept pulling. After a while, I started noticing something else. Even though we had filled nearly half the boat earlier, it didn't look as full anymore. At first, I thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe the fish had settled, flattening out. But then I realized something that made me freeze. The pile of fish at my feet looked smaller than before. I told my uncle, "Wait, did some fall back into the water?" My uncle looked down. There were definitely fewer fish in the boat than there had been a minute ago. We stopped pulling the net. The water around us was still. No splashes. No sign that fish had jumped out. That's when we heard a sound coming from the opposite end of the boat. It wasn't loud. More like the sound of something chewing meat. We both turned at the same time. The moonlight made everything visible in shades of gray. We had a flashlight near us, but neither of us grabbed it immediately. The back end of the boat was in shadow compared to where we stood. I couldn't see clearly, but something about it felt off. My first thought was that a fish had flopped hard enough to hit the side, but when I looked down again, there were barely any fish near my feet now. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. My uncle slowly reached for the flashlight and turned it on, pointing it toward the back of the boat. There, at the far end of the boat, crouched near where the fish had been piled, was a black cat. Its fur looked almost too dark, blending into the night. But its eyes reflected red in the flashlight beam. A deep, bright red reflection that didn't look normal. We both just stared. "How did that even get here?" I muttered. In that same moment, the cat jumped straight into the water and vanished in front of our eyes. We rushed to the side of the boat and looked over. There was nothing. No ripples. No swimming shape heading toward shore. Just flat water under the moonlight. The net was still hanging over the side, heavy in the water. But inside the boat, there was nothing. Not a single fish. "That's not possible," I said. My uncle didn't respond. He just started the engine. "Leave it," he said firmly. "We're going back." His voice sounded different. We drove straight to shore without speaking. When we reached land, we pulled the boat up in a hurry. My uncle kept scanning the tree line. On the drive back, I tried asking him questions, but he didn't answer any of them. He kept both hands locked on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road. When we got home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was screaming at him to tell me what happened back there. He seemed to have to gather his thoughts before finally saying, "When I was looking at the opposite end of the boat, I knew I saw something. It looked like a person, but not clearly just a shape, darker than everything around it. And I also saw a dark, shadowy hand taking fish from the boat. I didn't tell you back then because I didn't want you panicking out there in the middle of the lake." After that, my uncle never went back to that lake at night again. In fact, he stopped setting nets there. This happened to my friend a few years ago, when he went to visit his grandparents in the village. Their house was at the very edge of the area, almost separated from the rest of the homes. Past their backyard, there was a large pond, and beyond the pond, thick trees that turned into a deep stretch of forest. No one really went into those woods. There weren't any proper paths, and the older people in the village preferred to stay away from it. He and his younger brother were staying there for a week during school break. There wasn't much to do besides help around the house, walk along the dirt road, or sit by the pond. A few local fishermen would come by in the mornings or late afternoons, but it was usually quiet. On their second day there, sometime in the late afternoon, they decided to borrow a small fishing boat from one of the fishermen. It wasn't anything fancy, just a narrow wooden boat with faded paint and a pair of old paddles. They weren't even planning to fish, seriously. They just wanted to drift around for a while and enjoy the breeze. The pond was bigger than it looked from shore. Once they paddled toward the center, the house and road seemed far away. The trees on the opposite side leaned over the water, their reflections dark and uneven. They were talking casually, when they both heard something. It sounded like something heavy falling into water. The sound came from the direction of the forest side of the pond. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. My friend said he thought maybe it was someone throwing something in from the trees, but no one ever went into that forest. Maybe it's an animal, his brother said. They hesitated, then slowly paddled toward that side. They didn't go all the way to shore, just close enough to see better. As they drifted near the edge, my friend noticed something along the muddy bank where the trees began. There were dark stains on the ground. At first he thought it was wet soil, but the color looked wrong. It was thick and uneven, and it trailed a short distance along the edge of the water. It looked like blood. They didn't say anything for a moment. The air felt still, no movement in the trees. Neither of them wanted to step onto that side. They both quickly paddled back toward the open part of the pond. They returned the boat before sunset and didn't mention it to their grandparents. They convinced themselves it was nothing. But they both felt uneasy that night. On the third day, they decided to actually go fishing. They rented the same boat again, this time for the whole evening. They brought proper fishing lines and some bait. The fishermen were around earlier in the day, but by late afternoon, most of them had left. The sky was turning slightly orange as they rowed out. They avoided the forest side at first. They stayed near the center, casting their lines and talking about school and random things. As it started getting darker, they decided to head back. That's when they saw it. There was a white boat floating near the middle of the pond. It wasn't there earlier. It was drifting slowly, almost perfectly still, as if placed there. They didn't recognize it. It wasn't the one they rented. This one was cleaner, painted white, with no one inside. At first they thought maybe someone left it there and swam back, but that didn't make sense. The water wasn't that clean, and no one swam in that pond, especially near evening. "We should check it," his brother said. They paddled closer. As their boat lightly bumped against the white one, my friend stood carefully and looked inside. There were dark stains across one of the seats. The same kind of dark, dried marks they had seen near the forest bank. They pushed their boat away and paddled back toward shore as fast as they could. When they reached their grandparents' house, they didn't tell them everything. They just said they felt tired and went inside. That night, something strange happened. They both had the same dream. In the dream, they were sitting inside that white boat, and from between the trees, there was a faint orange glow. It looked like it was coming toward them and growing larger. In the dream, neither of them could move. They were sitting in the boat, watching the glow approach from the forest edge across the water. Right before it reached the boat, they both woke up. Both of them sat up in their beds and looked at each other across the room. Neither needed to explain. They both described the exact same dream. That night, they both got a fever. It wasn't extremely high, but enough that their grandmother noticed. They felt weak the entire next day. That morning, my friend told his grandparents everything. His grandfather said he would check. By the time they returned home, their fever had faded. Slowly, their strength came back. Life returned to normal. They did visit their grandparents again in later years, but they never stepped onto that pond